As soon as my old alarm clock stopped ringing, I knew something was wrong. It was the one I'd had since college, dented and scraped from all the apartment moves I'd made. The time was 7:36 a.m. rather than 6:00. I was already running late. It was late enough for him to notice, but not by much. Like the city was on fire, I jumped out of bed, threw my hair up in a bun, gave my 8-year-old son Noah a forehead kiss, and ran toward the metro. The steel grey sky over Brooklyn reflected the constriction in my chest, with low bloated clouds. Before that morning, I was the senior operations lead at Kelon Metrics, a Manhattan investment software company. My name is Natalie Quinn, and I am 41 years old and a single mother. Although Kelon was unglamorous, it covered our rent and made me feel secure. I've been the first to arrive and the last to depart for the last 4 years. Every significant deadline they met had me as its silent backbone. My birthday was not honoured by anyone. Until I turned down a 7 p.m. appointment, no one knew I had a son. Give a call. However, I stayed. For Noah, for the steadiness. I was out of breath as I reached the turnstile at 8:22 a.m. Red appeared on my keycard. Once, twice, then a third time. Someone coughed behind me. I pivoted. It was Finance's Melanie. She leaned in and gave me a sheepish look. You might want to go directly to the executive floor. Andrew is waiting. Andrew, naturally. Our COO. Andrew Roth was a maestro of premeditated brutality. Always dressed in dark navy, clean-shaven, with inscrutable keen eyes like motionless water. A man who thought you were already behind if you were 5 minutes early. When he called me, I hadn't even cleaned the perspiration from the subway off my neck. No idle chatter. No inquiries concerning Noah. Don't worry. Natalie, he said, moving forward without pausing to see if I was following. Come with me. The door to conference room 4A closed as we walked in. The air is stale. You arrived late. I understand. My alarm clock stopped working, and like a gavel, he lifted one finger. I don't require justifications. I require dependability. I muttered, I've never been late before. I've handled every weekend emergency. Even in the air, he brandished a sleek black fob. Natalie, it's not about today. It has to do with patterns. I blinked. What trends? He didn't respond. All he did was push the fob. A red light flashed. Your authorization has been terminated. You will be escorted out by HR with instant effect. I remained motionless. I pondered for a long time if this was a terrible joke. It wasn't. I refrained from crying. I remained silent. I gazed at Andrew's icy, capable hands, the same ones that had previously shaken mine when I saved a $7 million deal from disaster. I gave one nod, comprehensive. Silently, I collected my belongings, that old alarm clock, a frayed notebook, and a tiny potted succulent that Noah gave me for Mother's Day. It had roused me up, but it had failed me that morning too. As I strolled down the hall, people looked on. A few stood. Nobody spoke. But I could see the fear, remorse, and perplexity in their eyes. I went by the break room's glass wall. My name had already been removed from the whiteboard by someone. The breeze hit my face as soon as I went outdoors. Even though it wasn't chilly, I still shuddered. 4 years. Missing school projects and plays for 4 years. For 4 years, I remained silent, swallowed what I ought to have said, and thought that my commitment would grant me respect. It vanished in an instant. I was in a daze when I took the metro home. The apartment was peaceful, and Noah was at school. I gazed at the alarm clock after placing it on the table. 36 a.m. The moment when everything broke. I prepared tea. I took a seat, and until my phone rang, I didn't touch it for hours. Unknown figure. Claire Donnelly appeared as a name. Former Kelon Vice President of Client Strategy, departed under strange circumstances 2 years ago. She spoke quietly. She said, I heard what happened. I remained silent. It's happening again, she added. and I believe it's time for someone to take action. I was surprised by how painful Claire Donnelly's call was. Elegant, intelligent, and the type of lady who could enter a room and silence everyone without speaking, she had been a star at Keylon. I had admired her from a distance, but we weren't particularly close. One day, though, she was just gone. Whispers in the corridor suggested internal politics, while the official memo stated family reasons. 2 years later, she was calling me now. Natalie, it's not just you, Claire remarked. You're not the original, and you won't be the last until things change. Num, I listened, she went on. I can't tell you everything over the phone. However, I'd prefer to meet if you're open to it. You don't realize how much is happening inside Keylon. The words lingered, alluring, perilous. But before I could say it out loud, a part of me that had been long suppressed by conformity and 14-hour work days whispered yes. The following day, we met at a quiet tea cafe in the Upper East Side, where the customers were too sophisticated to listen in, and the music was not too loud. Claire's stance was still royal, but she appeared older, tired, not aged. She took a folder that was bound in crimson twine out of her luggage. She stated, "The week after I left, I began collecting these. I was the first to do it. Anna comes next. Then there's HR's Rico. You." She moved the folder in my direction. Printouts, emails, and even internal documents that had been covertly forwarded to legal without the recipient's knowledge were contained within. I was surprised to find a pattern women over 35, particularly those who are responsible for providing care, are being quietly but systematically excluded. With calm eyes, Claire remarked, "I wasn't fired like you. They simply made staying impossible, reassigned my tasks, took away my power, and informed clients that I was transitioning out before I even realized it." My throat constricted. I recalled Andrew's speech. He had mentioned patterns. He was correct, but not in regard to me. "This is a cultural issue," Claire added. "Although Andrew is the spear's point, it is deeper than him. It is sustained by the silence." I remained silent. I simply gazed at my hands while recalling Melanie's terrified expression at the turnstile. The silence that fell on the floor as I walked by. Respect wasn't shown there. Fear was the cause. Claire leaned closer. "I'm not requesting that you go public. I am aware that you have Noah, but I want you to think about one thing. James and Harrow is a law practice. They are assembling a class action lawsuit alleging workplace discrimination against companies that exhibit systematic bias. You wouldn't need to say anything. Simply provide data." Silently. I gazed at her. "You want me to reveal the truth?" She murmured softly, "I want you to protect the next woman. Because both you and I are aware that Andrew will repeat this behavior, and it might be someone with no other choices the next time." I had trembling hands, not in terror. Clearly, I didn't get any sleep that night. Sitting on our living room floor with our alarm clock ticking softly next to me, I went through my emails. Not to get even, should keep in mind. Milestones for the project for which I never received credit. Andrew ignored my questions in Slack chats, but he quickly replied to the younger male team members. After I asked for pregnancy accommodations, I received calendar invites that cleverly left me out of important meetings. I had no desire for vengeance. I wanted to know the truth. You can't unsee it after you've given it a name. I met with James and Harrow the following day. They did not press. They didn't make it seem glamorous. All they did was listen, made notes, asked thoughtful inquiries. I sent them the timelines team organizational maps and snippets of emails I had. I requested that they make everything anonymous. The attorney answered, "We can do that. However, your documentation and credibility speak for themselves." I got an email 3 days later. No subject line, no name, just a scanned copy of an Andrew note from 2 weeks before my termination. It said, talk about Quinn's long-term transition plan. Think about the conflicts surrounding parental leave. It went beyond simple retribution. It had been planned. I stopped criticizing myself at that point. Life was slow back in Brooklyn. In the afternoons, Noah and I would walk to the bodega. For supper, we prepared pancakes. Every time I received a notification, my heart still twitched, but it was no longer out of terror. It was a sense of expectation, because conversations were beginning to take place at Keylon. I got an SMS from Melanie. HR seems skeptical about Andrew's story, that you were emotionally unstable and inconsistent. Then another from DevOps Eric word is that access logs were just pulled by compliance. They are investigating the protocol for deactivating badges. Lastly, from the first woman Claire mentioned, Anna. I recently sent James and Harrow my file. I put your name down as the source of my bravery. It was that. Andrew could never say anything that burned as much as that. I wasn't overlooked. Something was being ignited by me. Keelan, however, was determined to fight until the end. Andrew Roth wasn't either, since I didn't receive a message from a friend the next time. It came from the General Counsel for Keylon. Subject official request compliance with confidentiality, an NDA reminder. The message was straightforward, businesslike, and icy. The non-disparagement agreement that was signed upon onboarding is brought to your attention. Please don't say anything that could be interpreted as damaging Keylon metrics or its executive leadership's reputation. The sentence was read twice by me, but then again, they were afraid. My old alarm clock was ticking steadily next to the window when I turned to look at it. The time had come. The time was 4:02 a.m. when the alarm clock's ticking sound woke me up. That steady rhythmic sound, no warning. Click, 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 as it has for years each morning. It wasn't there to wake me up now, though. It served as a reminder that I was already conscious. The lawyer's email was ingrained in my mind while I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. NDA reminder, provision against disparagement. It was dangerous. Not a court case, not a stop-and-go command. Just to remind you they still believed that I was scared. However, I wasn't, because once someone has found their voice, you cannot scare them with silence. I boarded the subway to Midtown the following morning, not to Keylon, but 2 blocks south to a building without a logo on the entrance, wearing the same blazer I had on the day I was fired. Only a quiet waiting area, an elevator, and a security desk. I spoke with Lucia Tron, an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission senior investigator inside. The encounter was arranged with Claire's assistance. Lucia was straightforward, kind, and as shrewd as glass. I turned everything over, emails, notes from the meeting. Claire had anonymously forwarded the HR memo. And above all, the screenshot of my badge deactivation with the timestamp. 8:22 a.m., fired for being late just once every 4 years in less than 5 minutes. Lucia did not give a nod. She simply wrote something down, turned to a new page, and uttered, "This pattern is not new to us. However, this is exceptionally clean. Too tidy." She was correct. Everything was sanitized by Keylon. The day I departed, their HR records, the exit story, and even my calendar access were deleted. The fact that everyone else was observing, however, was something they had overlooked. Nico Alvarez, a former junior analyst I mentored, called me 3 days later. He worked harder than anyone I knew, but he seldom spoke much in meetings. Natalie, an ethics training requirement was just announced, required for the entire business. Keylon has been concerned about ethics since when? Exactly, he replied. Additionally, Andrew hasn't been around all week. Whispering is going on. I didn't grin, not quite yet. However, something inside of me broke loose, allowing a small amount of air to enter, because light can enter via fissures. Something else was stirring in the meantime. A recruiter at Meridian Harbour, a cloud-based data company I had briefly consulted with on a back-end migration project, sent me a message on LinkedIn. Their message was brief. "Hello, I heard about Keylon from Natalie. Tell us if you're available. Your documentation rules are still cited like holy texts by our VP of Operations." I froze as I gazed at the screen. It reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten, not because I was shocked I did well. Excellent. Keylon's lack of response had caused me to question it. But wasn't that the main idea, make you invisible? Don't get too big? However, those I had assisted had not forgotten. The meeting then took place. When I joined the Zoom call at 9:00 p.m., Noah was already asleep. Like some covert sisterhood of survivors, Claire Anna and two other former Keelan workers had convened online, all of us illuminated by the drab glow of our laptop displays. Every woman shared her story. Some had been driven out, others demoted, and one had even been admitted to the hospital due to stress. Many departments, the same motif. It was more than just a support group, though. It was a plan. "All of our files have been turned in to the legal team," Claire stated. "They're creating a schedule. However, we require one more item." On the screen, everyone turned to face me. "You were the final person, the most well-known one," Anna remarked. "They will believe they have won if they silence you." I inhaled deeply. I wouldn't have hesitated in the past, but not the woman who left with her head held high, not this version. I said, "I'll write a letter." "An open one?" "No," I answered. "Not just yet. However, a genuine one, just so you know." For the truth, that's exactly what I did the following morning. I opened a blank document and gave it the straightforward title, "I was not invisible that day." I also wrote, not a tirade, not a manifesto, just the facts. What took place, what I provided, what was stolen, how devotion had been exchanged for money, how motherhood was viewed as a sign of weakness, how my quiet had once been interpreted as consent. I concluded by saying this: a person can be fired, a badge can be taken away. What other people remember when they shut down their PCs at night, however, cannot be erased. The letter was not sent to Keylon by me. I forwarded it to the EEOC's Lucia. James and Harrow received it from me. I forwarded it to myself after that. It was printed. I folded it. I tucked it into my notebook's back cover. Because often the best records are the ones that wait for their moment, rather than the ones that shout the loudest. The moment arrived sooner than I had anticipated. Everyone underestimated Michelle, the executive assistant, yet she texted me, "Be aware." Andrew was just summoned to a board meeting behind closed doors. The entire workplace is tense. Additionally, IT is recovering earlier internal files. There will be something soon. And then there was another. Additionally, HR is at last questioning employees about their true feelings regarding the culture. Nat, you set off a domino effect. As I waited for Noah to finish chess club in the school hallway, I read those words. I glanced down at my wristwatch. I then took a quick look at the ticking alarm clock that was the background on my phone. Before I departed Keylon, I took this picture. It was not ostentatious. Only a chipped knob and a rusty frame. However, I was awakened. Was an eye woke me up to the idea that protection equated to loyalty. Noah asked me, "Why aren't you going to work anymore?" while I was putting him to bed that evening. I grinned. Because adults sometimes have to start over as well. "Are you afraid?" I gave him a forehead kiss. "A little. In general, though, I'm prepared." There was silence at first. It's the kind that precedes a storm, not the kind that comes from peace. Michelle sent me another text on Monday morning. "Andrew has been placed on executive reassessment leave. No one understands what that means, although legal is involved in case you missed my message." I froze my fingers on the keyboard. Corporate jargon for determining how much we're willing to publicly acknowledge was reassessment. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Already the clock was running out. I got a call from an unknown number that afternoon. Hey, Ms. Quinn Danica Ward is this person. I'm calling on behalf of the executive team at Meridian Harbour. Instinctively, my spine stiffened and I stood up. After looking over your file, we would like to formally extend an offer to you for the Senior Director of Strategic Systems role. Your experience is exactly what we need, particularly with regard to documentation formats and crisis management. Her tone was unapologetically direct. No ambiguous HR jargon, not a theatre. She added, "We're willing to match Keelan's entire compensation, but more importantly, we offer something they didn't." "What is that?" I inquired, quietly. "Deference?" She said, "For your time, for your personal limits. Additionally, having children does not diminish your abilities." I felt it like a cord untangling in my chest when I closed my eyes. "I agree," I replied. I meant it too. Noah and I were outside our building the following morning, standing in front of a contribution box. In one hand, I held the antique alarm clock. "You don't intend to retain it?" He squinted up at me and inquired. I said, "I thought I would. However, I no longer require it." I carefully put it in the package, not because I was angry about it, however, because it had fulfilled its purpose. I was awakened by it. Claire sent me an email at midday that day. Subject: leaked internal communication. Forwarded memo: it came from someone inside Keelan and was a PDF. A thorough board overview of current events. I read it 3 times. A number of unreported terminations of women over 35. Possible exposure to the EEOC as a result of recorded irregularities in exit protocols. Andrew Roth is the subject of a formal investigation that is awaiting external assessment. The final line follows. Before Q3, we advise a complete third-party audit of HR practices and full cooperation with the federal inquiry. They were no longer only hiding tracks. The fire alarm was being pulled. I was surprised to get a voicemail that evening from Irene Caldwell, the chair of Keelan's board, a number I recognized. "Ms. Irene here, Quinn. I would want to ask for a quick private discussion about your leaving. We would like to investigate possible avenues towards settlement and compensation after becoming aware of a number of procedural shortcomings. Tell us if you would be available, please." I didn't answer. Not with resentment. However, there are instances when the only truthful solution is to let someone suffer the repercussions of their own silence. 3 additional women had submitted official affidavits to the EEOC by Thursday. I got a message from Anna. The quiet exodus is the name given to it. A week with 4 resignations. On the way out, people are finally speaking the truth, not just walking away. Rachel, a former intern, shared a now viral LinkedIn update. On the same day, I used to work for a corporation that taught me nothing about leadership and everything about fear. For being 5 minutes late, I witnessed the smartest person in the room being thrown out. She is now the model for my desired career. No names, not a single call out, just the silent truth. And in less than 48 hours, more than 2,000 shares. There was no drama in the judgment. It wasn't screamed out loud or featured prominently in headlines. It was everywhere, and it was peaceful. Adherence, money lawful. They were all starting to unravel the narrative that Andrew had crafted to support his position. That week, Michelle sent one last text. I just saw the board leave a meeting that was held behind closed doors. HR's Craig appeared pallid. Renewals are the whisper. Retractions. An apology, perhaps. At Meridian Harbour, I read it while drinking coffee at my new desk in the sun. No cubicles that are grey, don't play power games, only room, as well as light and honour. I received a calendar invite for an executive orientation workshop later that day. This message was attached to the invitation. We are so happy to have you here, Natalie. Perfection is not what we demand. All we ask is that you be yourself. Greetings from the table. I spent a long time staring at those words because I hadn't felt like I belonged at that table for 4 years. I realize now, though, that I had never belonged under someone's control. Where voices were heard, not muffled, was where I belonged, where sick children and delayed trains weren't seen as liabilities, when stillness was not necessary for strength. That night, as I turned off my computer, I glanced at the area where the alarm clock had been. There was no longer any ticking. The lesson, however, wasn't. It's odd how a habit may stick with you for a long time after it's broken. Weeks after starting my new job at Meridian Harbour, I still woke up at 6 in the morning and reached reflexively for a nightstand that no longer held the alarm clock. Only the peaceful breathing of a child sleeping in the adjacent room and the gentle morning light streaming through the window were audible. Don't panic. No fear. Nothing but silence. I had mistaken tiredness for ambition for years. For the sake of strategy, be quiet. Fear of punishment. I didn't wake up feeling like I was already behind, though, for the first time. I felt present when I woke up. Meridian's onboarding process went smoothly, not because it was flawless, but rather because it was human. Instead of starting with analytics, my first team meeting started with introductions and a query from our COO. What is the most important thing to you outside of work? I went cold. That was the first time I had ever been asked that in a formal setting. Never. Practice chess with my son Noah. I said, clearing my mouth when it was my turn. And on Sundays, pancakes. They gave a sincere nod, not a courteous one, as though those items were equally as significant as my resume. Perhaps they were. Keelan's echoes, meanwhile, had not stopped. Claire sent along a final EEOC update. Andrew Roth, who was kicked out of all leadership positions for good. Patterns of discriminatory practices were validated by internal audit. The structural failure to uphold inclusive standards was acknowledged in a public statement. 7 ladies have been identified as co-complainants. The list did not include my name. I had made that decision. Because being a headline was never the aim. It was supposed to act as a mirror, reflecting back all of the things they made an effort to overlook. I never did answer the phone when Irene Caldwell called. However, a large envelope showed up in the mail a few days later. No address for return. A formal letter on Keelan letterhead was enclosed. We acknowledge that our achievement was largely due to your contributions. We sincerely apologize for the pain caused by the circumstances surrounding your leaving. You were worthy of better. A large check was tucked behind the letter. A compromise, a compensation. In addition, it was an admission, not in court, not in the open. However, in ink. And sometimes that's sufficient. The check was never cashed by me. Rather, I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my notebook, directly behind the letter about the day I wasn't invisible, that I had written weeks previously. 2 realities together, I conducted my first strategic planning session on a Friday afternoon. All 5 members of my team were intelligent, varied, and inquisitive. One of them, Ava, paused halfway through the meeting and remarked, "I'm just glad you're leading this. You create room without making us smaller." I was at a loss for words. I simply grinned. For years I had gotten smaller to fit into spaces I believed I should be in. In actuality, though, I wasn't that large. Simply said, the rooms were too tiny. Noah and I watched the sun set behind the Brooklyn skyline while eating leftover pizza on our fire escape that evening. Leaning into me, he said, "Are you pleased now, Mom?" I turned to face him, this little person I had given up so much for, and occasionally because of. "Yes," I muttered. I believe I am at last. I discovered a parcel at our door later while he was sleeping. Once more, no return address. There was something surprising inside my antique alarm clock. Restored, cleaned, polished. There was a handwritten remark next to it. Because of you, we all woke up. I refrained from crying. I was unable to even smile. The clock would no longer wake me, but it would always remind me of what was important. So I put it on a new shelf over my desk. Time. The truth, and the silent strength of staying visible. Because the most effective kind of retaliation is ultimately quiet. They are unable to eradicate it. It's fearless leadership. It is ascending without authorization. It involves picking areas where you can sit at the table without having to give up your voice. Above all, it's always remembering you were never invisible. They simply lacked your bravery.